All right, now to this. The family of Jeffrey Epstein's sex abuse victim, Virginia Giuffre, says they are just stunned by recent comments from President Trump. You may remember the president said he had a falling out with Epstein after he said Epstein stole Virginia Giuffre, who worked at his spa at Mar-a-Lago. Well, now her siblings say they want to know what the president knew and when about Epstein's sex crimes.
I think we were shocked by it. Especially to use the term stolen. Because she's not an object. She's a person. She was recruited by Maxwell. She wasn't stolen, she was recruited.
CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane is following all of this. Scott, that's tough to listen to. Why is the family choosing to speak out now so publicly, and what is it they want addressed?
Virginia Giuffre's name has become part of the political dialogue this week as this Epstein controversy continues to engulf the White House several months after Giuffre's death. The president, if he is trying to turn the page on this Epstein controversy, has instead given it new momentum by talking about arguably the most visible and vocal of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, Virginia Giuffre, using that phrase that Epstein stole Giuffre from Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort many years ago. That type of word choice in the context of sex trafficking and sex abuse victims is a trigger to any number of people, including Giuffre's family. The president was asked on Thursday about this issue, about the use of the word stole and about Giuffre. Take a listen to what he said.
I said, if he's taking anybody from Mar-a-Lago, he's hiring or whatever he's doing. I didn't like it, and we threw him out. We said we don't want him, at the place. This is a story that's been known for many years, as you know. But I didn't like it that he was doing that.
As they spoke with media Thursday night, Giuffre's family also talked about this prospect, this possibility that Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's co-conspirator, could be pardoned. And that's an issue that's going to loom until the president declaratively says either way. And remind us, Scott, as that potential pardon hangs in the balance, that Maxwell had spoken with the Department of Justice. We don't know, as far as I understand, the details of her two-day interviews with Todd Blanche, the deputy AG, correct? I mean, that's the next thing, or one of the many things you're trying to get new information on. That's why there's a thought that a pardon could be on the table, because Maxwell, a week ago today, sat down for a lengthy interview with the Deputy U.S. Attorney General as the Trump administration promised more transparency on the Epstein case. The president hasn't ruled it out. Maxwell's defense lawyer didn't return a request for comment about a possible pardon, but Giuffre's family says that pardon would be wildly unacceptable, in their words, abhorrent, arguing that Giuffre said Maxwell was as culpable as Epstein in the sexual abuse of her and other young girls. Difficult topics, important information. Scott MacFarlane across it all. Thank you.
And if people in that report are still fighting to keep their names private, Sean, they have no legal basis to do so.
She was so adamant. That was Trump Attorney General Pam Bondi, of course, just last year, before she was Trump's Attorney General, saying that people named in government files related to Jeffrey Epstein had no legal basis for keeping their names private. Bondi went on to lay out a very specific and narrow set of exceptions. Take a listen.
They have no legal basis to do so unless they're a child, a victim, or a cooperating defendant.
Okay, so to make the point very clear, that was Trump's own attorney general just last year, saying that not only that files related to Jeffrey Epstein should be released, but that the only names that should be allowed to be redacted from those files should be the names of children, victims, and cooperating defendants. Fast forward to today, and Bloomberg News is reporting that the FBI redacted President Trump's name in the Epstein files. Now, I should say that NBC News has not independently confirmed that reporting, and the White House, the FBI, and the Justice Department all declined to respond or did not respond to Bloomberg's request for comment on that story. But last I checked, Trump was not a child, nor was he a victim or a cooperating defendant in the Epstein case. The FBI reportedly had 1,000 agents pulling all-nighters, pouring through more than 100,000 documents related to Epstein. And people familiar with the matter tell Bloomberg that the FBI identified numerous references to Trump in that process and then blacked them out. Now, of course, the appearance of any names in the files does not mean necessarily that the named people did anything wrong, and Trump's name was not the only one blacked out. They also blacked out the names of other high-profile individuals as well. But I could have sworn Pam Bondi said there would be no legal basis for doing that, right? That's what she said a year ago. Now, the other major piece of news we got on this story today was about Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was, of course, convicted of sex trafficking minors. Now, after spending 9 hours over 2 days just last week meeting with Trump's former criminal defense attorney turned Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, where no one knows any details of or who else was there, today, Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to a minimum security federal prison camp called Camp Bryan in Texas. Now, if the name of that prison rings a bell, it may be because among its current inmates are celebrity prisoners like Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes, who was convicted of defrauding investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars, and Real Housewives of Salt Lake City star Jen Shah, who was convicted of conspiracy to commit wire fraud related to a telemarketing scheme that tricked elderly people. Employees of Camp Bryan describe security at the facilities being generally lax. The minimum security facilities does not keep prisoners under strict watch and gives them some freedom within the camp because the inmates there are considered low-level security risks. Now, I don't want to downplay, and I'm not in any way trying to downplay the damage and pain that Elizabeth Holmes or Jen Shah caused their victims, but there is a massive substantive difference between the kinds of white-collar crimes they committed and the horrific sex crimes Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of. In a statement today, victims and the family members of victims that were preyed upon by Epstein and Maxwell wrote, President Trump has sent a clear message today. Pedophiles deserve preferential treatment, and their victims do not matter. Ghislaine Maxwell is a sexual predator who physically assaulted minor children on multiple occasions, and she should never be shown any leniency. Yet without any notification to the Maxwell victims, the government overnight has moved Maxwell to a minimum security luxury prison in Texas. This is the justice system failing victims right before our eyes. And while a senior administration official told NBC News tonight that any false assertion Ghislaine Maxwell was given preferential treatment is absurd, that's what they say, that's their statement. According to the Bureau of Prisons' own policies, Ghislaine Maxwell was not eligible to be transferred to this prison. A federal prison expert told NBC that the Bureau of Prisons management can waive those rules, but it's extremely rare, and he had never heard of it happening before. As one employee of the Bryan, Texas prison camp told NBC today, if someone has a history of sex offense, of violent crime, they are not supposed to be there. So why was Ghislaine Maxwell transferred there, and who made it happen? Congressman Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, wrote to the head of the Federal Bureau of Prisons today and warned, quote, the favorable change to the conditions of Miss Maxwell's incarceration, despite being denied bail on 3 occasions for posing an extreme risk of flight, raises possibility that the Trump administration and the Bureau of Prisons may be affording Miss Maxwell preferential treatment in an effort to shape or distort her testimony about Jeffrey Epstein. And joining us now is the author of that letter, Congressman.
New questions surround the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Officials say Epstein associate and convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell was moved from a low-level security prison in Tennessee to a minimum security prison camp in Texas. That move, which typically requires a waiver, happened just days after Maxwell and her attorney met face-to-face with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for 9 hours over 2 days. Meetings from which we still have no notes and a less than completely clear picture of who else was even in the room. The families of Epstein and Maxwell's victims slammed the decision, saying in a statement, quote, President Trump has sent a clear message today. Pedophiles deserve preferential treatment and their victims do not matter. For more, I want to bring in Dave Weigel, political reporter for Semaphore, and Carol Lenig, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter with The Washington Post. Thank you both for being here tonight. Carol, I'll start with you and your reaction to this new chapter in the Epstein controversy. Our colleagues Lisa Rubin and Ken Delanian reported earlier today that this was technically not allowed and it would have required a waiver to make this move happen. So how shocking to you is this move? And does it, for you as a reporter, does it make you question if a deal of some sort has been made here?
Well, I think the only conclusion we can come to is that Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to a less restrictive facility, obviously minimum security prison camp, basically a nicer kind of country club kind of location, because she agreed to sit for 2 days full of interviews. I don't think there's it looks causative. However, I will say the even stranger thing that's going on here is she's been sentenced, convicted, tried, and sentenced to 20 years in prison. And the flummoxing event is, what exactly is the law enforcement purpose of re-interviewing her over certain facts about Jeffrey Epstein after those facts have been adjudicated, tried, established? What is the purpose for any law enforcement?
So let's go back to Washington and CBS News political director Finn Gomez. Finn, did you ring that bell, my friend? No.
You don't need a bell. When Kelly O'Grady talks, you listen. She's always so informed and so great at
she is. But I do want to ask you about the president ending his trip to Scotland. He's back now. He answered more questions on the story seemingly that he wants to go away. And that's, of course, the Jeffrey Epstein case. A lot of people calling for those files. What is the president having to say now?
Yeah, the president shed a little more light, Reed, on exactly what led to that falling out between him and Jeffrey Epstein, of course, that a convicted sex offender. He passed away about 6 years ago. But he was offering details on this falling out over what he called Epstein's, quote, poaching of employees from his Mar-a-Lago property spa, in reference Virginia Giuffre, one of the first women to make accusations against Epstein, and really one of the most prominent abuse survivors, who also passed away earlier this year. Here's what the president had to say about it. Take a listen.
When I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine, and then not too long after that, he did it again, and I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, does that include Virginia Giuffre?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her.
Yeah, the president also said that he told Epstein to, quote, stay the hell out of here, meaning Mar-a-Lago. Last week, the White House had said Trump had booted out Epstein for, quote, being a creep. So this, I think, adds a little more light to that narrative. Trump and his advisors, as you know, Reed, have been seeing growing pressure in recent weeks, including from his base, to release more files related to Epstein. I did talk to someone close to the White House, Reed, who told me, who questioned why Trump added more fuel to the fire, if you will, with these comments when he had opportunity to focus more on tariffs and on his trip to Scotland. But this gives him more air, he said, and something that, like you said, seemingly will not go away, a story that will not go away. Reed.
Finn Gomez, always great to talk to you. Now you can go get that lunch in D.C. You are released for a little bit. Thank you so much.
But also, the family of Virginia Giuffre released a statement overnight in response to some of the comments that you made this week. You said that Jeffrey Epstein stole people from Mar-a-Lago. At the time, did you know why he was taking those young women, including Virginia?
No, I didn't know. I mean, I would figure it was ABC fake news that would ask that question, one of the worst. But no, I don't know really why. But I said, if he's taking anybody from Mar-a-Lago, he's hiring or whatever he's doing. I didn't like it, and we threw him out. We said we don't want him, at the place. This is a story that's been known for many years, as you know. But it's I didn't like it that he was doing that.
That was Trump being asked about a timeline as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein that isn't quite adding up. Here's why. So just days ago, Trump said this.
Just curious, were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Were some of them
young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken. And it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad. But that story's been pretty well out there. And the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
What did they do?
In the spa.
Jobs. In the spa.
Yeah, it's people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago. And people were taken out of the spa.
hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told him, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine. And then not too long after that, he did it again. And I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah, he stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know, none whatsoever.
So Trump claims here that he didn't know why Epstein was taking these women. Now, that may be true, but let's also remember the famous quote from 2002 in New York Magazine. "I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy," Trump booms from a speakerphone. "He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." Virginia Giuffre worked at Mar-a-Lago in the year 2000. Jeffrey Epstein first trafficked her in 2001. That quote from Trump alluding to Jeffrey Epstein's affinity for young women was from 2002. So I'm not saying outright that Donald Trump knew, but the dates would certainly suggest as much. And of course, he attacks ABC News for asking the question. But remember, it was not ABC News that put this issue front and center. It was the people who Trump filled his administration with.
You say that the FBI has Epstein's list. They're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
Is it going to be shocking?
I don't see how it's not shocking that there were so many individuals that were hidden and kept secret and not been held accountable. Let's talk about the reverse. I believe in accountability. So you have to now go through your process. Now, I won't say they're guilty until they go through their time in court. But again, now it's time for accountability.
A lot of people are wondering, because you said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk, is when can we see them and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
What kind? Are we going to see who was on the flights? Are we going to see any evidence from what he recorded? Because he had all of his homes wired with recording devices.
Yeah, what you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information. But it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay, well,
along with his co-defendant.
Absolutely, and he had help. That's for sure.
He sure did.
The Ghislaine Maxwell Black Book. What names are in there, man? You understand how many powerful people probably want this thing to desperately go away? How many people were interconnected with this Epstein sex ring operation? There are a lot of tapes out there of a lot of people. I'm not ever going to let this story go because of what I heard from a source about Bill Clinton on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein. I talked about it yesterday. You can go check it out. I'm not letting it go ever. Ever.
In fact, even Donald Trump himself brought it up.
Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein.
You raised the question of Jeffrey Epstein in your remarks about in the Q&A.
Well, I think he's got a problem. I mean,
what do you think the problem will be?
I don't know, but that island was really a cesspool. There's no question about it. Just ask Prince Andrew. He'll tell you about it. The island was an absolute cesspool.
The reality is that Donald Trump knew that he had no intention of ever releasing the Epstein files when he was on the campaign trail. He was just telling his supporters what they wanted to hear in exchange for their votes. He hoped they were gullible enough to swallow whole whatever lies he fed them when he finally got into office like this.
You know, these files were made up by Comey They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden we went through years of that with the Russia hoax.
You see, they were cooked up by the Democrats to sink Donald Trump, which is why they never released the Epstein Files. Yeah, perfect plan, no notes at all. But the reality is that Trump felt his base was stupid enough to believe it. Turns out they're not. And so I hope they realize that this is a small part of a larger whole. It's not just that Trump was lying about Epstein. It's that Trump will lie about anything and everything in service of consolidating power for himself. That is what Trump does. It's his entire MO. He doesn't actually care about any of the things he promises supporters. That's how he lures people in. In his first term, he promised an infrastructure law that never materialized, a healthcare plan that was cheaper and more comprehensive that never materialized, a middle-class tax cut that never materialized, a jobs boom that never materialized, a manufacturing renaissance that never materialized. But he did make time for a tax cut for himself. And now he's doing the exact same thing, promising reduced costs and cheaper groceries and lower rent, and yes, promising justice when it comes to Epstein's victims and accountability for his criminal associates, but he's not delivering on any of those things. The only thing he's actually done is give a tax cut to himself. Yet again, how many times does Trump have to completely fuck you over before you begin to realize that lying isn't a bug, it is a feature? He knows that he can say whatever he needs to say to get your vote, and that once he gets it, once he's able to consolidate power for himself, he doesn't need to stand by anything. So look, I hope that Trump supporters out there recognize the con. I hope they recognize that Donald Trump got what he needed from you and now has no intention of following through on anything. The reality is that these people swept into office pretending to want to defeat the deep state. This is what the deep state is. It is a bunch of wealthy, powerful elites looking to protect themselves and their own interests. These are those people. Donald Trump pretended he wanted to fight against them when in reality, the perpetrators are Donald Trump and his allies themselves.
This month, the Federal Bureau of Investigation released the primary video used in the investigation of the death of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Deputy Director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, described that video on Fox & Friends just weeks before its release.
There's video that when you look at the video, and we will release, that's what's taken a while on this, we are working on cleaning it up to make sure you have an enhanced, and we're going to give the original so you don't think there were any shenanigans. You're going to see there's no one there but him. There's video clear as day. He's the only person in there and the only person coming out. You can see it.
We showed this video to multiple video forensics experts who agreed what the FBI and others have said is simply not true. That video and other evidence led to the conclusion by the government that Epstein's death on August 10, 2019 was suicide. An analysis in consultation with video forensic experts suggests multiple inconsistencies between statements from government officials, including Bongino, a report from the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General into Epstein's death released in 2023, and the tape itself. These inconsistencies, while not contradicting the conclusion Epstein died by suicide, do introduce questions that the government so far has declined to answer. We'll show you those in a moment. First, let's break this all down. Epstein was held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan, in a unit separate from the general population known as the Special Housing Unit, or SHU. The unit has 3 wings, each with 2 levels. Epstein was held in the upstairs L tier of his wing. That tier is accessed by a set of stairs from the central common area. Directly adjacent to those stairs is the officers' station, where on-duty corrections officers spend most of their time. The Inspector General report says several cameras in the unit were streaming a live feed to a remote location in the prison, but no one was watching them. Malfunctioning equipment meant only one camera recorded the general area. That camera captured part of the common area, including the officer's station and a sliver of the staircase leading to Epstein's cell. The footage begins at 7:40 p.m. the night before Epstein's death. You can see staff and inmates moving about, preparing for the nightly lockdown. That's the officer's station in the background. Only 2 employees have been publicly identified. Tova Noel, a corrections officer pulling a double shift that began at 4 p.m., and Michael Thomas, a materials handler who won't arrive until midnight. Epstein is seen for the first and only time on camera at 7:49 p.m. when the Department of Justice said he was escorted to his cell from another wing of the unit. It's important to note here, you don't actually see Epstein ascend the stairwell to his cell block. Remember what Dan Bongino said.
There's video clear as day. He's the only person in there and the only person coming out. You can see it.
Let's zoom in and play that again in slow motion. Here's the sliver of stairs. Epstein is here with his escort, and they walk off screen. When the FBI released the video, they said anyone entering or attempting to enter the tier where Epstein's cell was located from the common area would have been captured by this footage. But with the primary entrance here, the pathway from the entrance to the stairs is completely out of view of the camera. For the next hour or so, corrections officers and inmates are seen moving about, preparing for all prisoners to be locked down. At 8:21, another inmate is seen being escorted toward the stairs leading to Epstein's cell area. No movement is detected on the stairs again. By 8:24, all of the inmates appear to have been taken to their cells. Noel told the Inspector General she visited Epstein's cell at about 10 p.m. You can see her head in that direction here, albeit closer to 10:30, but not climb the stairs. The rules require rounds to be made every 30 minutes, but according to the report, this was the only time anyone checked on the inmates that night. There was even a sign printed on orange paper posted on the guard station saying mandatory rounds must be conducted every 30 minutes on Epstein, as per God. This was because of concerns about his risk for suicide. At 10:38 p.m., the report says someone, probably Noel, carries a bundle of bedding or clothing up the stairs. It's a rare instance the video does catch movement on the stairs, but barely. Let's see that zoomed in and in slow motion again. Several of the video forensic experts we spoke with were skeptical about the report's conclusion and thought that the video could be showing an inmate walking up the stairs. Authorities say this was the last time anyone approached his cell block until his body was discovered the next morning. Again, while the video does not contradict that, experts who viewed the video say the limited field of view makes it impossible to definitively conclude that no one used those stairs in that time period. Beyond this, there are other issues our investigation and others have uncovered. At 11:21 p.m. and 34 seconds, a cursor appears briefly on screen, indicating the video may have been recorded with a camera or a screen recording and was not an export of the RAW file. The FBI said it had seized the prison's hard drive 5 days after his death and had released the full RAW footage this month. Two experts told CBS News the video's metadata, which tracks how a file is created and changed, shows it's made from two clips stitched together in editing software. Those experts also say the video was edited and saved multiple times. Next up, the now famous missing minute. At 11:57 and 35 seconds, an individual appears on screen from the direction of the main door. It's likely this is Michael Thomas arriving for his midnight shift and replacing the other staff member on duty who'd been working from 4 to midnight. Noel was starting a second shift of 8 hours. From that point on, only Noel and Thomas were on duty during the critical window when Epstein is believed to have died. At 11:58 and 58 seconds, the video jumps to midnight, and the aspect ratio of the video changes slightly, another indication it may have been edited. Zooming in and playing back in slow motion, you can see a slight shift in the shape of the figure standing or sitting around the officer's desk, but otherwise, nothing changes. Attorney General Pam Bondi attributed the missing minute to a nightly reset of the security camera system.
There was a minute that was off the counter, and what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999, so every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing, so we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night.
That additional video has not been released, and a government source has alleged to CBS News the FBI and other agencies are in possession of the full, unedited footage. Why the FBI did not release that is unclear, and the agency offered no comment. Importantly, the Inspector General gives no indication there was a minute missing when their team reviewed the video. We can surmise the male staffer working the 4 to 12 shift would have left during the missing minute based on the report, leaving just Noel and Thomas. But that is not seen on camera. Serious problems with the government's investigation and witness statements don't end there. The report says the unit was secured by 2 doors, one requiring a key held only by Noel and Thomas. Noel told investigators no one could enter without her physically opening that door. But here's where it gets tricky. Let's look at this one example. 4 a.m. Noel remains in full view of the camera, yet seconds later, someone walks in, and it appears neither Noel nor Thomas let her in. The report is silent on this apparent contradiction. And even if there was no other key, both Noel and Thomas had ample opportunities to let someone in. At least a half dozen times, one or the other of them exits the camera frame in the direction of the door, all without explanation. We shared this with our forensic experts, who agreed there was no way to conclusively determine from the video whether an unseen visitor was or was not let into the Epstein unit, although both Noel and Thomas have said no one else entered. At 6:22, either Thomas or Noel walk off screen again and reappear carrying food trays, breakfast for the prisoners. At this point, based on the autopsy results, Epstein is believed to already be dead. According to Thomas's account, he arrived at Epstein's cell to deliver his breakfast and found him in a seated position, his buttocks an inch from the ground, held up by a torn sheet tied to the bunk bed in his room. At 6:30, someone rushes in from off camera, according to the report. This was Noel returning to the desk to call for help after Thomas discovered Epstein. Epstein's body was quickly removed from the cell. Only Noel and Thomas witnessed him hanging. At 6:40 a.m., the video ends. Epstein's body is not seen being removed. Both Thomas and Noel have said they played no role in Epstein's death. They were charged with falsifying documents, but those charges were dropped as part of a plea deal. Additional clarification could come from a second camera mentioned in the report. It recorded an elevator bank in the same unit, although the report stated that it did not cover areas that would have included access to Epstein's cell. It would at least show a missing minute. We reached out to the Department of Justice to see about obtaining that footage. They referred us to the FBI, who referred us back to the Department of Justice. Neither Thomas nor Noel responded to our inquiries through their legal representatives. For a case that demanded transparency, it's yet another muddled chapter, raising more questions than it answers.
President Trump says he never visited Jeffrey Epstein's private island. Listen.
I never had the privilege of going to his island, and I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island. In one of my very good moments, I turned it down. I didn't want to go to his island.
Those comments come as attorneys for the longtime Epstein accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, are expected to make their final pitch to the U.S. Supreme Court as they look to try to overturn her conviction. She's currently serving 20 years in prison. Let's discuss with CNN's senior legal analyst and former state and federal prosecutor, Elie Honig. Elie, thanks for joining us. Walk us through where things stand with Maxwell's expected Supreme Court appeal.
So, Wolf, back in 2008, when Jeffrey Epstein was prosecuted by Justice Department prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida, he was given an outrageously lenient plea deal. And in addition to all the sentencing benefits that Jeffrey Epstein was given, there was a really unusual provision in that deal, which said that none of Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators will be prosecuted in that district. Now, fast forward to 2020, Ghislaine Maxwell gets indicted in the Southern District of New York, a different part of the Justice Department. And Maxwell has argued both at the trial court and the Court of Appeals that that deal DOJ made back in 2008 benefits her. It says she can't be prosecuted if DOJ says she's one of the co-conspirators. However, DOJ's position up until now, including now, has been that that deal was only binding on the prosecutors in Florida, not on prosecutors in New York, and that kind of deal, releasing co-conspirators, is basically invalid because it's so much against public interest. So judges have ruled against Maxwell at the trial court level and at the Federal Court of Appeals level, and now Maxwell is down to her last hope, which is trying to get the U.S. Supreme Court to take up this issue.
So what do you think? How much of a hope does she have?
So the Supreme Court statistically takes only a very small proportion of all cases brought to it, under 10%, usually under 5%, usually in the range of 2 or 3% recently. On the one hand, Wolf, there have been different interpretations of this issue in different circuits around the country, which is usually a factor that makes it more likely the Supreme Court will take the case. On the other hand, though, the Supreme Court was brought this same exact issue in a separate case a few years ago and declined to hear it then. So maybe they've had a change of heart. So I would say overall it is unlikely but not impossible that the Supreme Court takes this case.
If this appeal fails, Elie, what other legal avenues could Maxwell's team pursue?
So it's clear that Ghislaine Maxwell now is making a play for some sort of leniency. She got a 20-year sentence. She's about 5 years into that sentence, and she's in her mid-60s. The other way she could get relief, or there's really two main ways. One is to hope for a pardon or a commutation, and we've seen various comments made by the president refusing to rule that out, saying he hasn't thought about it. But the other one is Maxwell can try to convince DOJ prosecutors, and this may be what's part of behind the meeting that she had last week. She can try to convince the DOJ to write a letter, what we call a Rule 35 letter, to a court saying, yes, she's already been convicted and sentenced. However, she's been cooperative. Her cooperation was helpful. And therefore, Judge, we ask you to resentence her to something lower. Now, DOJ should be very careful about when they write those letters, especially in a case like this. But it is theoretically and procedurally possible.
As you know, Ellie, this morning, President Trump once again spoke about whether he could pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. I want you to listen to what he said specifically. Listen to this.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. It's in the news about that aspect of it, but right now it would be inappropriate to talk about it.
So what stands out to you about those comments from Trump?
I don't know, Wolf. This boggles my mind. It's the same response he's been giving. Will you consider a pardon for a convicted child sex trafficker? I mean, the easiest thing to say is just no, of course not. What president wouldn't say that? And the fact that Trump keeps saying he has the power, and by the way, he's right, he does have the power, as unseemly as it might be, and then says, you know, I haven't thought about it. I mean, that's the same answer that Donald Trump has given many times in the past with other people who he did end up pardoning or commuting. So look, obviously there will be a serious political cost to doing that, but I think it's pretty telling that Donald Trump has said anything other than absolutely not.
How could Maxwell's interview the other day with the Justice Department's Deputy Attorney General factor into what we are seeing happening next?
Well, I think the play we're going to see from Maxwell's team is obvious and the right play from any defense lawyer's perspective, which is to make an argument to DOJ. Look, she has now come forward. She has given you valuable, truthful information. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that'll be what Maxwell's attorney says. And therefore, we want you to go to a court and ask for sentencing leniency. From DOJ's perspective, it's a little bit unclear what exactly they're doing. I am skeptical that Ghislaine Maxwell is anywhere near credible enough to sign up as a cooperator and to bring other indictments based on her information. I cannot envision myself ever having done that. It would shock me if DOJ did that. So maybe they're just trying to get her information. Maybe they have some interest in getting whatever she said out there to the public to try to appease critics. But there's an interesting sort of political and legal dance happening here between the parties.
I want to play some of what Republican Congressman Thomas Massie said about the possibility of subpoenaing Jeffrey Epstein's estate. Listen to this.
I think we should get a lot more than just the book. Let's get the financial records of the estate. Follow the money, as they say up here. We should look at the plea bargain, open that up.
How big of a development, Ellie, would this be? What could lawmakers learn if that were to happen?
Well, it's an interesting idea by Representative Massie, and I know he has some bipartisan support. On the one hand, the notion of let's subpoena the Epstein estate, they can do that. Congress has broad subpoena power. Now, the estate might well resist it, and it may well end up going to court, but I think Representative Massey is right that could shed some light on really the mystery around Epstein's finances. There's then a separate question about subpoenaing DOJ. Now, traditionally, Wolf, the Justice Department would resist that type of subpoena, would say we don't open up our closed files to Congress. However, if you think about the political reality now, I think it's pretty tough for Pam Bondi to say, no, we want to legally resist a subpoena from Congress, especially if it comes with bipartisan support.
Ali Honig reporting for us. Thank you very, very much. As President Trump looks to move on from the Jeffrey Epstein case during his trip abroad, Republican divisions here at home appear to be getting even deeper. Some members of his own Republican Party not only amping up calls to release the so-called Epstein Files, but accusing his Trump administration of not delivering on its promises. Listen to this.
We all thought that when Trump was elected, he would be the bull in the china shop and that he would break that up and bring transparency. Frankly, it wasn't until just recently that I realized that people who were allegedly working on this weren't sincere in their efforts.
Part of this problem is that there were some false expectations that are created, and that's a political mistake. I think that saying that you're going to be able to deliver when you haven't even looked at all of the files and what's available was probably a misstep.
CNN congressional correspondent Lauren Fox is here with me in the Situation Room. Lauren, walk us through where things stand now.
Yeah, certainly lawmakers are on this 5-week recess at this point. The speaker clearly wanted to move beyond this last week. And yet Republicans in the House are still talking about this. You hear from Thomas Massie there, you hear from Eric Burlison, making clear that they feel like Donald Trump and the Trump administration perhaps has made a political miscalculation when it comes to the promises that were made related to the Epstein files and what they've been able to deliver up to this point. Meanwhile, you have the Speaker of the House who's carefully trying to make sure that he is in the right place with his conference and in the right place with the president. And you can guess that there is a lot of tension there between where he wants to be. He was asked over the weekend what he thought about potentially absolving Ghislaine Maxwell of her crimes. And this is what he said yesterday.
If you're asking my opinion, I think 20 years was a pittance. I think she should have a life sentence at least. I mean, think of all these unspeakable crimes, and as you noted earlier, probably 1,000 victims. I mean, it's hard to put into words how evil this was, and that she orchestrated it and was a big part of it. At least under the criminal sanction, I think is an unforgivable thing. So, again, not my decision, but I have great pause about that, as any reasonable person would.
Now, the Oversight Subcommittee actually voted on a series of subpoenas last week. Wolf, those subpoenas have not gone out yet. I just checked with the source this morning. So there's a lot of questions over how quickly that process could be moving, even though there is this loud drumbeat in the House Conservative Congress.
No sense that this issue is going away by any means.
Not.
All right, Lauren Fox, thank you very, very much.
Out front tonight, the breaking news, a CNN exclusive tonight out front. K-File has unearthed photos of Jeffrey Epstein that we've never seen, and they shed new light on his relationship with President Trump. The revelations come as Trump is under fire from his own base for his Justice Department's handling of the so-called Epstein Files. Trump has tried, of course, to distance himself from Epstein every which way. But one of the photos that K-File found confirms that Epstein actually attended Donald Trump's wedding to Marla Maples. And this is the proof. Again, this has never been published before. So this is a new image. You haven't seen it out there on X or anything like that. This is the proof that Epstein attended Trump's wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York. And in the photo, what you see is Epstein entering the Plaza Hotel. The wedding date of this is December 20th, 1993, in the center of their friendship, which of course continued. And for comparison, we'll show you on the right a photo of Trump and Marla Maples at the same location under the entryway arch. Andrew Kaczynski of K-File is here with the new images of Trump and Epstein. And Andrew, I shared one of them there, but, so let's start with the one at Trump's wedding. I mean, this is a significant development.
Well, yeah, it is. Trump's wedding to Marla Maples in 1993 was dubbed the wedding of the century by the media at the time. And although we know that Trump and Epstein were friends during this period, this is really the first time that it's actually been reported that Trump invited Epstein to his wedding. This is, we should note, more than a decade before those first allegations of sex trafficking against Epstein. But as you know, Trump's relationship with Epstein has been under the microscope recently. Now, besides that one photo of Epstein entering the reception at the Plaza Hotel, we can also see him in the background of another picture. That's Howard Stern on the far right, along with Robin Leach from Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And Epstein is behind them at the wedding, almost seeming to be photobombing them. We also found this photo from just a few months earlier, Donald Trump with two of his children talking to Jeffrey Epstein. That's at the opening of the Harley-Davidson Cafe in New York in October 1993. You can see Ivana there. She would have been just about to turn 12 years old in that photo.
Yeah, you can see Ivanka right there between Trump and Epstein. All right, these are never before seen photos, Andrew. I know you also found some video of Trump and Epstein that was from later of them talking that has also never surfaced before. What's that?
Well, that's right. This is from 6 years later in 1999. This video has never been seen before in this context. It shows Trump talking to Jeffrey Epstein just before models hit the runway at the Victoria's Secret fashion show in New York in 1999. You know, the only other video we've seen of the two men was 7 years before this. Trump is at the show with Melania, who is, of course, now First Lady, seated a few feet away from Epstein. You can see them chatting during the show as well. Allegations that Epstein sexually abused underage girls didn't surface until 2005, years after this video was shot.
Right, but this, of course, establishes them together and obviously very friendly in 1999. So, Andrew, when you get all this, and all of this, as I just want to emphasize, right, has not been seen before. So you actually called President Trump. You called him directly to ask him about this.
Yeah, we were not on the phone very long. I think our call was about 30 seconds or so. But when I asked him about the wedding photo, he said, he sort of paused for a second and then said, "You've got to be kidding me," before calling CNN fake news and then hanging up on me. Now, in a statement to CNN, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung said this. He said these are nothing more than out of context frame grabs of innocuous videos and pictures of widely attended events to disgustingly infer something nefarious. The fact is that the president kicked him out of his club for being a, quote, creep.
All right. Well, it is incredible reporting, and it is important in this context as the country wants, answers on everything to do with Epstein. Andrew, thank you so much for all of that breaking news.
Welcome back. There are many questions surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein case. My next guest says there are 9 really, really important ones, and he wrote them down in an opinion piece in the New York Times. His name is Barry Levine. He has reported on Jeffrey Epstein for about a decade and is the author, The Spider, Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Barry joins me now. Barry, great to have you with me. I'm going to drive my folks in the control room berserk. This is terrible television, but it's great conversation. So I'm going to read your 9 questions. Question 1. How did Mr. Epstein make his money, and how did he finance his sex trafficking over 2 decades? 2. Did Mr. Epstein have any ties to spy agencies? 3. Are there references to Mr. Trump, meaning President Trump, in the files that add to our knowledge of his relationship with Mr. Epstein? 4. What about Bill Clinton? 5. Who were the clients implicated in Mr. Epstein's sex trafficking operation? 6. Who helped Mr. Epstein overseas? 7. What did investigators find in Mr. Epstein's safe, computers, and other property? 8. What do the videos show? And 9, what is in Mr. Epstein's autopsy report? Barry, I listed the 9. What are the most important of the 9?
Well, I'm constantly getting hit, Major, with questions about Jeffrey Epstein's death. And I think it's black and white. Let's get that autopsy report out to the American public. There's no reason for the government to be holding that back. And let's learn once and for all, did Jeffrey Epstein have any defensive wounds on his hands? Was he trying to possibly fight off an assailant? Let's get more details about the noose that was used. And also the death investigation. A couple quick questions here. What about DNA evidence? Was there DNA evidence on the bed sheets that he used to, the government says, to hang himself? What about foreign DNA? What else do we know about the past suicide attempt? And was there any evidence corroborating that? I wrote in my book that there were inmates who heard bed sheets being ripped up that night that Jeffrey Epstein apparently used to take his life. So let's get to the bottom of that, first of all.
And Barry, what about the conversation I just had with Scott McFarlane about the release of the surveillance footage of that night within the corrections facility itself?
Yeah, I mean, that was an excellent report from Scott. I was just watching that. We don't have really any more videos beyond that. We were told that the other videos in that unit had malfunctioned. And of course, the guards were, falling asleep that night. So they had falsified reports in which they were reprimanded. But the issue I have certainly is, and I went about this in my book, could there have been some type of conspiracy to take him out or allow him to take his life? I know from my investigation that it would have been virtually impossible, unless there was a major conspiracy in that jail, for others to enter that cell, because that cell block was actually controlled by a main guard station where even the guards upstairs had to alert the main control area if they were going to open doors and so forth. So, we'll never know in terms of the deficiencies in the video that the government put out. And it is troubling that we have, as Wired Magazine had initially reported, that there were gaps in that tape. So, I think at this point we need to see the raw tape and at least put that material out so we can help understand what's happening here.
Barry, what about question number 2? Did Mr. Epstein have any ties to spy agencies? Remind my audience why that is a very important question.
Well, it's a very important question because there was a belief for years that Jeffrey Epstein was getting compromised material on very wealthy and powerful individuals and also people connected to different political parties, not only in the United States, but also he had ties to politicians in Israel. And there has been a belief that he might have been had ties to not only the U.S. government intelligence, but also the Israeli Mossad. We know for a fact that his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, her father, Robert Maxwell, who was a famous publisher, wealthy publisher in London on Fleet Street, had extensive spy asset ties to the Israelis and also to the British government. So, it's all come together in a sense of, was Jeffrey Epstein an intelligence asset? We know that at the time of the slap on the wrist conviction in 2008 in Florida, that Alexander Acosta, who was then the U.S. attorney, who helped make that deal come together, he said that Jeffrey Epstein was part of intelligence and that the decision in terms of the slap on the wrist agreement was above his head. So we still have questions, and I'm hoping that the FBI files could shed some light on that.
About 2 minutes to go, Barry. Talk to my audience, diagram for them the Donald J. Trump and the William Jefferson Clinton of it all.
Well, I mean, these are two prominent names that we know Jeffrey Epstein has been connected to, along with, Prince Andrew from the royal family. And now we know for a fact that it's been disclosed that President Trump is indeed in the files. It doesn't necessarily mean any wrongdoing, but I think as the sitting president, initially we should see the references to him. And of course, if there's any third parties mentioned or victims mentioned, their names should be redacted. But let's see the context in which President Trump is referenced in those files. And Jeffrey Epstein also had a very close relationship with Bill Clinton, the former president. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell knew Clinton for many years. In fact, Epstein and Maxwell paid several visits to the White House and were given exclusive tours by Bill and Hillary Clinton. So Bill Clinton has not been acknowledged in terms of any wrongdoing. Neither him nor President Trump have ever been investigated by law enforcement related to Jeffrey Epstein. But I think it's important to see the context of the information that the FBI files have on not only those two powerful men, but the others.
Barry, this story is going to continue. I hope you come back because you shed important light on all of it. Barry Levine, investigative journalist and author. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Major.
We're invoking federal law and using our authority as a check on the executive to compel transparency. It's not a stunt. It's not symbolic. It's a formal exercise of congressional power under federal law. And we expect an answer from DOJ by August the 15th.
This letter has the force of law. This letter invokes a statute that has been little used because it has been unnecessary in the past to enforce transparency. It's necessary now because this administration is stonewalling and stalling and concealing.
This is not complicated. After promising full transparency for years, Every single time Trump, his administration, Republican leaders have had a chance to be transparent about the Epstein files, they've chosen to hide. The evasions, the delays, the excuses. They are not just odd, they're alarming. It begs the question, if there's nothing to hide, why all the evasiveness?
It's the moment Jeffrey Epstein is asked about his friendship with Donald Trump, and it's going viral today.
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
The year was 2010, and the financier was battling an onslaught of lawsuits from multiple women, accusing him of sexually abusing them as minors. Epstein and Trump were known to be good friends, and in the deposition, he was asked directly.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Epstein pauses, shakes his head, then answers.
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
The deposition has resurfaced as the backlash over the Epstein Files continues to dog the president. Today, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche traveled to Tallahassee to speak with Epstein's ex-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. She's serving 20 years for recruiting underage girls for Epstein. One thing Ghislaine Maxwell may be asked about is the birthday book, a book of raunchy letters from Epstein's friends she reportedly put together for his 50th birthday. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump wrote a letter with a doodle of a naked woman. He's calling the report a scam and is suing the newspaper.
The existence of the book is it's an absolute fact.
An attorney for Epstein's victims say the book is real and is currently in the possession of the Epstein estate.
It's going to go down in history so that the world can see this book, and they'll know who were Jeffrey Epstein's best friends at the time, what other pictures are in there.
Yes.
The agenda of this president in this summer period is completely smothered by his mishandling of Epstein, their prior relationship, their social links, the first administration, where, as I've reminded you, Jeffrey Epstein died under suspicious circumstances under the Trump DOJ custody, and all of the recent broken promises. Now, we have what has become a bizarre turn in a story that for some people on the right was always a conspiracy content thing, but of course rests on a foundation of real crimes, real victims, and at least one person, of course, in prison, the convicted sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's conspirator. Now, there's talk of her trying to get out of prison if Donald Trump will help her. This normally would not even be a thing that we would cover, for example, if she were just asking for this randomly with no other ties to the administration. But this is a Trump DOJ that has pulled her out of prison for interviews, and a president who has done what was previously unthinkable, which is leave open the door to a pardon for this person.
You said yesterday your falling out with Jeffrey Epstein was over him taking some of the workers from your business, but your administration in the past said that you threw him out because he was a creep. So can you explain that discrepancy?
Well, maybe they're the same thing, sort of a little bit of the same thing. But no, he took people that worked for me, and I told him don't do it anymore, and he did it. And I said, stay the hell out of here.
President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her.
What you heard there, and you can see it in the transcript, is this Trumpian style of speech that we've all become somewhat accustomed to. I don't know. Not sure. I think so. Landing on the yeah. Now, if this were a random question about an old story and you said, well, give someone the benefit of the doubt, maybe they're trying to remember, but there's nothing random about it. This is the story that has consumed Donald Trump as president for many days now, but of course, as a candidate for many months when he sold a certain version of it. His history with Epstein and those people and those victims are all something that he has had time to reflect on, and he seems to be unable to clearly explain what he did then, what the nature of their relationship was, how it ended, what he did or didn't say to him at the time. Maybe they were friends without any other crimes, but why deny and sue the Wall Street Journal over those alleged birthday salutations if that's all they were? These are the kind of questions that are dragging down Trump. And that's the Epstein history personally. That's before you even get to, of course, the handling of this in government. That MAGA and other critics are dealing with not only whatever Trump's personal history may or may not be, could be nothing of an ethical or legal dimension. That's possible. And he still has to answer for why there is the apparent secrecy, the broken vow to release material, and now what many podcasters and critics call a blatant cover-up. They put out a memo saying we can't release anything more. Days later, under pressure, Trump says we might release more. All of it looks like a Watergate of sex trafficking. Doesn't mean we know who was involved beyond what the case showed. I want to be very clear. I've said that repeatedly. But it does mean on the cover-up side, there are questions that are just not being answered, whether that's from reporters, MAGA allies, legal analysts, and we've heard, of course, from some victims who've also criticized the Trump government administration's handling of this, totally separate from whatever happened back at Mar-a-Lago. In Washington, Republicans are subpoenaing Maxwell, partly because they apparently don't think that whatever DOJ did is enough. They want to talk to her themselves. And some Democrats say what DOJ did is suspicious. So again, a bipartisan view that other government officials are breaking with Trump and want to handle this separately because they don't trust him. Maxwell even saying she would testify to the Congress under conditions like immunity and getting some briefing about advanced questions. Committee says it won't try to grant her immunity. It's not even clear when you're already incarcerated in these federal crimes what other immunity would really be relevant, except for perhaps, of course, lying to Congress and perjury. Maxwell's lawyer, talking about Trump, says in the alternative, were she to get, quote, clemency, she'd be willing and eager to testify openly and honestly in public before Congress. Maxwell's attorney is basically telegraphing something in public. She is the one person who's paid the most for what was then defendant and then deceased Epstein's alleged crimes. He never went to trial on many of those sordid things. The idea that there's any discussion or open door to letting her out of prison right now is not only completely legally baseless and ethically curious, but it also would be the exact opposite of what MAGA and other folks said was so important about this story. Remember that Epstein and his co-conspirators did bad things. So why would Trump leave that door open? I'm asking these questions, but I'm not pretending these are just open, neutral. Some of these questions raise more questions, like why are we even talking about pardoning someone involved and convicted of the sex trafficking of minors?
This is self-inflicted. First of all, nobody told Pam Bondi she had to issue that memo in the middle of a slow news summer where people would, of course, predictably be digesting it and the Republican base be horrified by it for the entire summer. That's really how this is unfolded. And whoever told the Justice Department that this could somehow be buried and that people would move on and that the Trump administration could get away with that ridiculous 2-page summation of you're not getting any more information because there's no there should be fired. That person is an idiot and didn't understand the Republican base, certainly the core MAGA base. So now can we really trust anything this woman says when it's either this, give something up or someone up or spend 20 years in jail. So they've really created this own pickle for themselves. And we still haven't had a presser by Pam Bondi or even a long form interview. So it's hard to have a lot of sympathy for the complaints of why won't this go away?
That's Megyn Kelly's breakdown. Speaking as someone who knows this universe, she's interviewed Trump. She is in the MAGA podcast digital space now. She was, of course, at Fox News prior. She's also an attorney. And she referred to some very public facts there, that Bondi was doing all these interviews and selling all this without giving it up for allegedly, according to Kelly, what she views as Bondi's aggrandizement on the political right. Then, as Piers Morgan mentions, they came up with nothing. And then, as Kelly explains, they've gone quiet. No press conference, no governing apparent obligation to explain this beyond those 2 pages. In a well-functioning government, you have government officials who speak to journalists, credentialed press, and, of course, other branches of government like Congress. Bondi could testify, could even privately brief the Congress, if any of this were serious and on the level. But what you're also seeing, and this is why it's a story with layers, is what Piers Morgan and Megyn Kelly and Joe Rogan appear to be frustrated with, what Rogan called the gaslighting by the administration, what Kelly says is the refusal to deal with journalists and critics fairly, is something that Trump has been rightly accused of on a host of issues in this and the last term. We're not new to this. And yet some people seem absolutely aghast and upset about the, quote, gaslighting Rogan or the stonewalling of journalistic and open interview questions. Kelly, as if this has not been the playbook all the time. Apparently, And this is where the humanity comes into it, because it is all people dealing with politics here. Apparently, those people, and I say this fully respectfully, don't like it when that MAGA playbook is used on them.
Donald Trump's wedding to Marla Maples in 1993 was a grand affair at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. The guest list was a who's who of the rich and famous, and among them was none other than Jeffrey Epstein. There he is, in a newly unearthed photo, entering the reception hall.
We know that Trump and Epstein were friends during this period. This is really the first time that it's actually been reported that Trump invited Epstein to his wedding.
The photos were uncovered by CNN. They also discovered this new image from that same year. It's Trump with Epstein at the opening of a restaurant. Trump's children, Eric and Ivanka, are also there. And here's Trump chatting with Epstein at a Victoria's Secret fashion show in 1999. Melania is there. This was after he divorced Marla Maples and before he and Melania got married. The photos and video were all taken many years before Epstein was exposed as a pedophile. But they're sparking fresh speculation about the depth of Trump's friendship with Epstein.
They were joined at the hip.
Stacey Williams briefly dated Jeffrey Epstein in 1993. She's a former Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. How would you describe Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump's relationship back then?
He always had anecdotes and would say, Donald and I just did this and we did that and I had to go here. You know, they were just clearly close friends and did everything together.
Trump hung up on CNN when they called to ask him about the newly unearthed images.
He sort of paused for a second and then said, "You've got to be kidding me," before calling CNN fake news and then hanging up on me.
A Trump spokesperson says these are nothing more than out-of-context frame grabs of innocuous videos and pictures of widely attended events to disgustingly infer something nefarious.
Welcome back. We have a major development in the Jeffrey Epstein case. CBS News has learned the missing minute from the Epstein jail video before his death back in 2019 may not be missing at all. Earlier this month, the Justice Department released nearly 11 hours of surveillance footage from outside Epstein's cell. Now, just before midnight, the time code jumped forward on the screen. A government source now alleges the government has a copy of that video that includes that minute, but it's still unclear why the section was missing when the video was first released. CBS News asked the FBI and Justice Department for a response, but they declined to comment. CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen joins us now from Washington with more on the fallout. Jake, thank you for joining us today. We know officials, they cited this video as a key piece of evidence in figuring out if Epstein died by suicide. But what could this development actually mean for the death investigation?
Well, it's certainly another question mark that the Trump administration and Justice Department are going to have to answer to. The big question here, Mugo, obviously, is why not just release that full video if it exists, which our CBS News reporting shows that there is an additional copy. This copy, according to metadata and experts that we spoke to, is a screen recording of the original copy, and it does not jive with what Attorney General Pam Bondi said earlier this month, in which she was pressed on what actually happened to that, and she said that the security footage tape basically resets. You lose a minute during that resetting time, and that's why the full video wasn't put out. Obviously, that's not necessarily true, and we don't know. We should say to our viewers what is in that missing, quote, missing minute that the Department of Justice has access to. But what we do know is that they did say this was the full video when they initially put it out. It's clear that that's not true. And in addition to the questions that have really been hovering in the political football that's now been passed between the Justice Department, White House, and Congress about finding answers of what is in these Epstein files and what actually happened to him, this adds one more question mark to this whole situation that is not going to go away anytime soon.
Oh, yeah, it definitely adds another question mark. So a controversy also surrounds Jeffrey Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison. What do we know about the attempt to overturn her own conviction?
That's right. And while President Trump and Maxwell's attorney did not rule out potentially a conversation last week, giving her some kind of immunity going into the conversations with the second in command of the Justice Department and 2 days of questioning, Maxwell is separately fighting in the Supreme Court to have her conviction potentially overturned. The Supreme Court would have to take this up later in the fall, so there won't be a resolution anytime soon in this. But the argument generally is that there was a promise made to Jeffrey Epstein in 2007, I should say, when he first made a plea agreement with the prosecutor's office in federal prosecutor's office in Florida, in which they said no co-conspirators would be indicted as a result of that agreement. Obviously, that did not happen in New York. It's a completely separate investigation in which Maxwell and Epstein were later charged, and Maxwell was obviously convicted. They said that this promise to not prosecute co-conspirators should be held to a nationwide standard in terms of this specific promise that was made, and that if a promise is being made like this, it must apply to this, and thus she should have never been prosecuted in the first place. It's novel, and an appeals court sided 2-1 on this, so certainly there is one judge who agreed that there's certainly merit to this argument. The Justice Department has agreed to it, and we'll hear what the Supreme Court has to say if they decide to take this up and hear full breadths of argument on it later in the fall.
Wow. Okay. That's very interesting. I want to switch to a different topic now, though, because the D.C. judge who has sparred with the Trump administration over its mass deportation flights is now getting slapped with a misconduct complaint by the DOJ. What is this complaint about?
Well, that's right. Judge James Boasberg, who is at the center of the months-long back and forth since mid-March over the Trump administration's handling of Alien Enemies Act removals of alleged Venezuelan gang members, the Justice Department has taken issue with his stances in this case since day one, in which he ordered those 2 planes carrying hundreds of men to be returned. They weren't. It set off a months-long saga that is still far from removed. In fact, there was a hearing last week, and in this complaint written by Pam Bondi's chief of staff at the direction of Pam Bondi, CBS News has learned, the Justice Department refers Boasberg's conduct to a judge in the appeals circuit, arguing that his behavior in this case and in a judicial conference in March before this Alien Enemies Act case took off, in which he cast doubt on whether the Trump administration would be willing to follow court orders and could potentially spur a constitutional crisis, in Boasberg's words. They said that because he said that and then went through the motions of this case in which he's repeatedly cast doubt on the Trump administration and DOJ lawyers and is going through motions, although they're paused now, to hold the DOJ in contempt of court for the way that they have not listened to his arguments and kind of skirted around his demands for answers. They're referring him for some kind of judicial punishment. I should say, just for context for our viewers, that there was a case filed earlier this year in which the Trump administration did the same thing with the judge, and there has not been any kind of resolution to that yet, so we should not expect anything soon on this, but another attack on a judge who has done something that the Trump administration does not want to do here in D.C.
Yeah, it seems to be a pattern with the administration here. Jake Rosen in Washington, D.C. for us today. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Also during that cabinet meeting, questions about disgraced late financier Jeffrey Epstein. The fresh scrutiny comes after a new report out of the DOJ and the FBI that found that Epstein had, quote, no client list or any evidence that he blackmailed prominent figures. Listen to the president shut down a reporter when attempting to ask Attorney General Pam Bondi about that memo.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering, President.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration.
Now, eventually, AG Bondi did answer that question, even taking the time to clarify an interview she did on Fox News back in February, where she seemingly implied that the, quote, client list was sitting right on her desk. Take a listen to that.
In February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day.
Now, the FBI and the DOJ concluded that Epstein died by suicide while in custody back in August of 2019. They say he had more than 1,000 victims that suffered, quote, unique trauma. They add that after examining all the evidence in the government's possession, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted.
The House Oversight Committee subpoenaed the estate of the late Jeffrey Epstein today. The panel, led by Republican Chair James Comer, is seeking documents like Epstein's will and anything resembling a, quote, list of clients. They're also seeking a book of letters, reportedly compiled by his former partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, that was given to Epstein for his 50th birthday. It's the latest in a broader bipartisan effort to address public calls for more information about the handling of Epstein's case. His estate's attorneys have until September 8th to respond.
Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell is heard saying she witnessed no inappropriate behavior by any of his powerful friends, from Bill Clinton to Donald Trump, and telling the Justice Department Epstein's long-rumored list of famous clients does not exist.
There's no list. There's never been a list.
And you never heard Mr. Epstein talk about such a list?
Never.
Maxwell is serving a 20-year prison sentence for sex trafficking minors. In her highly unusual two-day meeting last month with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, the country's second highest-ranking law enforcement official and President Trump's former personal attorney, Maxwell said she saw no concerning conduct by Trump.
I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
She also called former President Clinton, who also had past associations with Epstein, truly extraordinary. And despite Trump's claim Clinton visited Epstein's private Caribbean island more than 20 times, Maxwell said it isn't true.
You're not aware of President Clinton ever going to the island?
He never, absolutely never went, and I can be sure of that, because there's no way he would have gone. I don't believe there's any way that he would have gone to the island had I not been there, because I don't believe he had an independent friendship, if you will, with Epstein.
The 63-year-old also claims she never connected Epstein with underage girls, despite her 2021 conviction.
I did introduce him to women. I did, but not underage women.
Epstein victim Annie Farmer, who testified against Maxwell, says otherwise.
She didn't just procure girls and women for Epstein, but she herself participated in their abuse.
Long before Maxwell initiated the meeting with the Justice Department, federal prosecutors said she lied about her crimes and failed to accept responsibility. Now, President Trump has refused to rule out a pardon as he seeks to defuse an outcry by some of his own supporters over his administration's failure to release more information about Epstein.
There have been no asks and no promises, and nothing like that has been made.
The family of Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre says they're outraged. The Justice Department gave Ghislaine Maxwell what they call a platform to rewrite history. Audio of the interview was made public as the Justice Department turned over Epstein material to the House Oversight Committee. But Rachel, the ranking Democrat on that committee, said the material consisted of largely information already made public. Rachel.
Yeah, Democrats calling that incomplete. All right, Aaron Katersky, thank you.
Did you, do you know somebody named Cheryl Mills? Used to work in the White House as a lawyer.
I do, yes.
How do you know Miss Mills?
I met Miss Mills through President Clinton.
Do you remember generally the time frame that you met her?
I do, actually. Hang on. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to remember. I'm trying to get my dates right.
Approximately.
Well, okay. I can't get my dates right. But it's something you probably can. But it's going to be in the early 2000s.
Okay.
So what I don't recall. I wanted to say 2002.
So it was after President Clinton left office.
Oh yes.
And so it was in the 2000s.
Definitely.
And how did you meet her? What were the circumstances under which you met Ms. Mills?
I went on a trip with the president to South America.
With which president?
Oh, sorry, President Clinton.
Yeah. Okay. Just
sorry.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear. Okay. So you went on a trip to where?
Latin America.
And so Miss Mills was on that trip.
She was.
And President Clinton was on that trip.
He was.
Who else was on that trip?
Doug Band.
Who worked with President Clinton?
Yes.
And was Mr. Epstein?
No.
And what was the purpose of that trip?
Well, the president had business. I don't know. I mean, the president met with, I can't even remember all the presidents, and we were in
But was this
Ecuador.
part of President Clinton's work after he left office with his foundation? Or was a meaning?
I don't think the
was it
foundation.
something for him?
When
Or
did
was
that, I don't remember when the Clinton Global Initiative started. So if you give me that date, I can tell you if it was pre or post. Because without that, I can't pin the reason.
Do you remember what it was for or not?
No, I don't recall. I mean,
Yeah, don't overthink or underthink the reason for my questions. I don't have any idea why you went on that trip, so
Okay,
I don't know an answer that I'm keeping.
No,
from
I'm
you.
just trying to be as accurate as possible and give you the
Why would
information that
you?
see.
Do you remember why you were invited to go? Like, were you friends with somebody? What was your role going on that trip?
I didn't have a role.
So, do you remember why? Do you remember who invited you to go?
Probably Doug Band.
And how did you know Doug?
Because Doug again back with Philip Levine.
Got it. And do you know whether he had a relationship with Mr. Epstein?
Who?
Doug.
I don't know. I mean, nothing. I don't believe there was any relationship other than I helped. Well, without me, I don't think there would have been those flights because I was the one who asked Epstein to provide the plane for. Well, certainly I remember the one to Africa, of course, that big trip. And I thought it was an honor and a privilege to be part of something so amazing and to have an opportunity to spend time with a man that I found truly extraordinary. And please, I don't mean it in any other way other than there's a former fantastic ex-president.
So I was asking around the question, but I was asking, like, were you basically asked to go because you were kind of responsible for the plane? Not responsible is the wrong word. They use you. They were able to use you to make sure that they could. You helped them get Mr. Epstein's plane for the trip?
No, I don't even know if when I was on that. In fact, I think that trip, I'm not even sure that Epstein had met the president.
Okay.
I think this is, but if I'm right, and I think I am, I think that trip happened when Epstein and Clinton had never even, not that they'd never met because Epstein had gone to the White House, but they had not met. I'd never asked Epstein for the plane then because they'd never met and it would be weird. But they met because of me and the plane was because of me. But that trip was the first, I think, the first trip I took with the ex-president. And I don't believe Epstein and he had met. And we're talking a time period when I was trying to leave, not very successfully obviously, but I was branching out on my own and being more independent of Mr. Epstein and trying to, I had all kinds of businesses that I was into. I was trying to start the first telehealth medicine with the Cleveland Clinic. I mean, I'm not going to bore you because I don't think that's what you guys are interested in, but those were the sorts of things that I was looking for him to finance so that I could stop being, general manager of a hotel.
Did you take other trips with some or all of those individuals kind of without Mr. Epstein in later years? Like you said, that was the first time that you kind of been on something like that, and it was an honor, and you were spending time with former President Clinton and others. Were there other, over the years, did you do that more than once?
Yes.
We'll talk about those. Like multiple times, like too many to count, or there 3 or 4 times? Like how many times?
A lot. I went on a lot of trips. Now, I don't recall all of them, not because I'm trying to be evasive or anything, but I just don't remember them all. And after a while, you know, in the incredible job that you have, all of you, that when you're so high pressured and you're spending so much time with extraordinary people like you do with President Trump, it can blur. It just does. And there's few things that stand out because at the end it's all just extraordinary. There's cars and sirens and president. It's like, whoa, okay.
So I understand, but talk. So don't give me understand. You can't give specific numbers. Describe more about kind of that part of your life and your relationship. I'm using relationship. You don't like relationship.
I don't.
And your and your
my employer.
Yes.
Right,
so just to describe what you were doing with those individuals. So when I say those individuals, I'm talking about former President Clinton, Doug, other folks that worked with him.
Of them, yes, there were loads of them, and basically all of them. You know the team. I don't need to give you all the names. You have them at your fingertips, and I can confirm. If you give me names, I'll say yes, because they're not all going to pop into my head. So,
right.
Okay. So I started spending a lot of time. Well, I don't want to characterize that, but I started to spend time with the former president and with Doug and his team. And I had no purpose, really, other than I obviously offered something. I don't know. Ideas of, I don't know. Anyway, and he started to travel. I don't remember if the first trip was Africa or how it went, but at some point, I think there was actually 2 trips, but I'm not sure. So there was to Europe and then to Africa. I think maybe it was all one trip. And at some point, Mr. Epstein said he didn't want to go on the trip, and he was going somewhere else, and he just left. And I was like, well, okay. And so I ended up doing the whole trip without Mr. Epstein or his plane.
And when you were traveling with them, what were the purposes of the trips? Like, is this one?
I think these were all. I think actually it was the AIDS was one of the primary ones for his AIDS foundation when he was working to do that, and there were always a humanitarian side to the trips. And we went to Egypt, and there was,
So it sounds like you're describing one trip with lots of
It
stops.
could be, but I have a feeling that I went on other trips, but I can't remember.
When you went on these...
I went to London.
To London, okay.
I don't know if that's the same trip.
When you went on these trips, were you always on Mr. Epstein's plane, or
No.
did you sometimes accompany them on a different plane?
Correct, yes.
How many were on Mr. Epstein's plane? Again, I'm not holding you to exact, but...
That was packed. Because there was a lot of Secret Service, it took all the Secret Service as well. So
Okay.
it was whatever the detail is for Secret Service, it's a lot.
And on how many occasions, besides the trip you just described, were there other times when they used, when President Clinton and the folks he was with used Mr. Epstein's plane?
I think there was twice, maybe, there was that, but it will reflect on the logs. There won't be anything that's not on the logs that you have already.
So I'm going to ask you questions that you shouldn't read into them. I just want to know whether they resonate with you. Have you ever had any contact with any representative that you know of from Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency.
Can you ask me that again?
Have you ever had any contact with an individual that you understand to be from Mossad, an Israeli intelligence agency?
Well, not deliberately.
Pardon me?
Not deliberately.
Okay. And did you know, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but just to put a finer point on it, did you ever know that were you ever told, you ever think that Mr. Epstein was getting any money from any intelligence agency, including Mossad?
Well, I don't believe so, but I wouldn't know. I mean, I would be very surprised if he did. I don't think so. No.
We've talked about a lot of names, and I'm sure there's some that we haven't covered. Are there any foreign nationals? So right now we've talked about some British, the royal family a little bit, and maybe high society folks in Britain. Were there any international businessmen or politicians that had a very close relationship or a close relationship with Mr. Epstein that we haven't already talked about?
Off the top of my head, I can think of Ehud Barak.
You said that Mr. Epstein, at some point in the mid to late 90s, he started taking testosterone. Did you ever know him to take any other drugs?
No. I mean, he took pills for his heart, I think. But no substances.
What do you know anything about his heart condition? I know we talked about this at 9:45 this morning, but do you know anything about his heart condition beyond that you understood he had a heart condition that affected his ability to have sex?
Other than what he told me, no, he never shared anything. But he did take pills. I don't know anything about that. And like I said, he did the testosterone, which made him mean.
And we're jumping around a little bit. Sorry. Do you know someone named Donald Barr?
No.
He is, I can represent to you, was a former headmaster of the Dalton School, which you mentioned earlier.
All right.
Do you remember any conversations with Mr. Epstein about a book that Mr. Barr wrote called Space Relations?
I've never heard of that.
About aliens and sex?